Welcome to Simply Happy Conversations, a podcast that teaches you how to create a clutter-free, functional, and simply happy life. I'm King, a professional organizer who supports families with practical steps to simplify their lives and create a more organized home. I'm passionate about supporting neurodivergent families and individuals like myself. Last week, I shared some of the things that I celebrated from 2024, some of the things that I achieved, and I shared the process of reflecting on your year. This is like part 2 of that episode because otherwise it would have been really long and drawn out. And so today I wanted to talk about the podcast and celebrate the 3 years because I have recorded now up to 170 episodes over that 3 years. And I wanted to share with you the favorite guest podcast episodes and solo podcast episodes that you have downloaded in 2024, and then finish by sharing a couple of my favorite podcast, books, and movie series that I consumed in 2024. So let's jump into this part 2 of a review of 2024. Welcome to part 2 of wrapping up 2024. Today I just wanted to talk about the podcast and celebrating the 3 years and 170 episodes and share with you some of your favorite guest episodes of 2024. Over the summertime, I'm going to be taking a break. And so from these 5 episodes that I'm going to be sharing now with you, I'm going to be taking a tip from each one of these, and they will be released over the summer. That is the order that they're in of when they're going to be released. Episode 149, which was Declutter Your Negative Thinking with Matt from Good Mood Revolution podcast. He's an author and he just actually released his book this week. He's also a podcast host of Good Mood Revolution and a happiness expert. And in that episode, he shared practical ways to declutter your negative thinking and remove bad mood thought patterns to achieve lasting happiness. And from that episode, I have pulled out a different tip that you will hear next week on the podcast in the summer series. The next guest episode that was one of the most downloaded was 129, which was recycling and decluttering with Donna from the Lifestyle Managers. So she offers lifestyle management, professional organizing and relocation services in Macedon and surrounds. So she does work into the Melbourne area as well. And she shared why people hold on to items and how to help people to let go of items. We also discussed items we can recycle in our home, and we both talked about ways that we can recycle things throughout Australia and different items and places that we both use as professional organisers. The third most downloaded podcast episode for 2024 was episode 132, which was Sustainable Wardrobe with Jenna from the Ironic Minimalist. She shares tips to help you create a sustainable wardrobe. The fourth most downloaded episode in 2024 was episode 139, and it was Keep Your Phone Photos Organised with Simply Grey Photography. Grey is a photographer in the Melbourne area, and she shared ways to keep your phone photos organised and why you need to back up your photos and a best practice for actually doing this. And the next most downloaded podcast of 2024 was episode 127. And that was Changing Neurodivergent and Mental Health Misconceptions with Differently Brained podcast. I had both Jacinta, Dietrich and Lachlan, Rutherford, the hosts of Differently Brained podcast, which champion neurodivergent and mental health awareness and acceptance. And they shared misconceptions around neurodivergence and mental health and what we can do as individuals and also as a community to change mental health stigmas and misconception. Over the summer, you will hear from each one of those guests a small snippet. So it won't be the whole episode, it'll be just a small snippet of it that you'll get to listen to. And it may then trigger you to go back and you actually might want to listen to the whole episode. The top 3 Simply Happy Conversation solo podcasts for 2024 were episode 133. It was Are You Ready to Declutter and Organize Your Home? And it was myself sharing the stages of behavior change and how they relate to you decluttering your home. So if you're like, I wonder if I'm ready to actually declutter or what's stopping me, this is a great episode for you to go back and listen to. The second most downloaded solo podcast was 135. 5. And this was let go of your stuff, not the memories. I shared simple steps to help you practice tolerating emotions that are associated with decluttering and how you can get started. So if you're thinking of decluttering your home over summer, these are definitely 2 favorite ones that it's worth going back and listening to. And number 3, most downloaded solo podcast was episode 130. And this was storage solution ideas that are waste-free and sustainable. In this episode, I shared ideas of things you may have around the house that you could use for storage and ways to reduce your environmental impact. If you're a regular podcast listener, I would appreciate if you could add a review the next time you listen. If you're listening now, maybe at the end of this episode, or share the podcast with someone who might find it useful. And thank you so much to all the new listeners. I know that the increase of listeners from, in particular, the US and UK has increased because of the guests that I have had from all over the world in the last 12 months. Thank you to all the new listeners and listeners who have been there for the last 3 years. Thank you to you as well. One thing I love about summer holidays, obviously we're in the Southern Hemisphere, is that we have a longer period off, and I love catching up on movies, TV series and books. So when it comes to TV series, I am going to share with you is 2 that I found really great this year. So we had 4 Years Later, which was on SBS in Australia, and it was a series that followed a love story of a couple from Jaipur in India, and one of them was like an aspiring doctor, yes, and his family planned an arranged marriage, and after the marriage, so he is offered a medical traineeship in Australia, and his wife stays in India for the 4 years with his parents. So the story is then when she comes to Australia, showing the 4 years and unveils what they both went through during that time. I just really loved the cultures, the 2 cultures, bringing Australia, India together, and the struggles that they both went through during that 4 years. And now the next one that I really enjoyed this year was Disclaimer, and that was on Apple TV here in Australia. And it was a mini-series about a famed documentary journalist, and her name was Catherine, and she was played by Kate Blanchett, that discovers she is the main character in a novel that reveals a secret she has tried to keep hidden. And so Kevin Kline plays the father of the boy that Catherine let drown in Italy 20 years earlier. I won't share anything more. You've got to watch till the end because it's not what maybe you expect the ending to be. Being someone who absolutely loves listening to podcasts, I'm going to share a couple of my favorites that I love to listen to every week. No Filter by Mia is one of my favorites this year that I've listened to. She interviews guests with riveting stories and just fascinating lives. Some of my favorite episodes of No Filter were when Mia interviewed Sharon Davis, and she is an investigative journalist, and she talks about Samantha Azzopardi, who has scams over a 10-year period that were here in Australia and overseas. Another one I really loved was the Jackie O and best friend Gemma that she did, and they share about the addiction that almost ended Jackie O's life. Another great episode was when she interviewed Charlotte Cowles, and she was scammed over in America, and it's how that unveiled over that few hours of it occurring. The episode that really stood out to me was the one with Darcy, the author of the book In Bad Faith. It's about growing up in an ultra-Orthodox community and the abuse she suffered from the principal Malka Leifer and how she fought back. It was just beautiful to hear her bravery and how long she fought, her and her sisters, to see some justice. I highly recommend listening to the episode, but then also even reading her book. The next podcast that I absolutely love listening to each week is Wardrobe Crisis with Claire Press. It's a fashion podcast about sustainability, ethical fashion, and making a difference in the world. A couple of my favorite episodes was the Jimmy Choo one, and he is just so lovely to listen to, so down to earth. And he shares his insight into craftsmanship and skill and passing on the knowledge now that he even has his own school in London for fashion and design. I also heard Jenna Flood, and her wardrobe freeze was on Claire Press's, and that's when I reached out to see if she would come and talk on Simply Happy Conversations. The other podcast I love listening to each week is the Neurodivergent Women, and it is by a clinical psychologist, Monique Mitchelson, and clinical neuropsychologist, Michelle Livok. They cover autism, ADHD, and everything in between, and they have some amazing guests on their podcasts. One of my favourite things that's happened this year is Spotify has actually released audiobooks if you're a subscriber. And so I have actually probably listened to more books this year because of that, as well as consuming some on my Kindle. But two of my favourite that I read this year was Jackie O, The Whole Truth. It was obviously from the podcast I heard, and then I listened to her actual book, which she's reading. And it's a memoir about her body, relationship, parenting, salary, her work, and also her health. And it's just beautifully written, and it's really easy to listen to. And I highly recommend that as a summer read. The next book that I read was Sociopath, a memoir. And it's a journey into Patrick Gaines' life. I found it really interesting to learn more about a sociopath and the things that she endured throughout her life. It really breaks down misconceptions and the stigma that we maybe have heard in regards to a sociopath. So I highly recommend reading that book also. So what are your favourite TV books recommendations from 2024? I would love you to share with me so I've got some fresh inspiration. I'd love to wish you all a very Merry Christmas or Happy Holiday or whatever it is that you celebrate at the end of the year. I hope you have some time to reflect on your year in preparation for 2025. I'm looking forward to just some downtime, to obviously read some books and just relax and spend some time with my family and hopefully even get to the beach. Please look after yourself and find some time to do the things that you absolutely love doing. Thank you again for listening and for commenting on social media and sending me podcast suggestions. Don't forget to leave a review and tune in to the summer series. A huge thank you to all the guests that I've had in 2024. If you'd like to be a guest in 2025, please reach out and send me a message or an email. Thanks again for listening to Simply Happy Conversations. Thank you for joining me for today's Simply Happy Conversation. Would you like to have a home for everything and easily be able to find the things you need during the festive season? To help you have the best Christmas season, I've created an extra special free resource for you, the Christmas Declutter Calendar. Quick and simple ideas designed to give you immediate results in just 15 minutes each day. Feel more organised this Christmas and download your Christmas Declutter Calendar from simplyhappy.com.au in the resource section. I'd like to acknowledge the Wathaurong people of the Kulin Nation on which this podcast is recorded as the traditional custodians of the land. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.